welcome to the podcast, Paul McGinley.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Damien. Nice introduction.
Nice to have you with us. Right, what is high performance?
What is high performance? Well, I'm coming from a world of failure, to be honest, if I can start there. I was thinking about this as I was walking in here today. What edge, is my edge is a different edge than what most people will come in with. You take a tennis player, for example, you take Nadal. He spends most of his career winning. His win ratio is up 90% or so. Of every game he's ever played since he was a boy. You've got your opponent in front of you, and you're as successful as he is. You spend most of your time winning. And I'll take you back to my first year as a pro, 1992. I was playing down in Jerez in Spain, and Jack Nicklaus was playing in that tournament. Jack was probably in his early 50s at that stage. I'd gone to college in America with his son, Gary. And cheekily, this was before mobile phones, 1992, and cheekily I asked Gary at the start of the week, I said, look, if there's any chance, I'd love to have dinner with your dad this week. I'm only on tour now 3 months, my first 3 months as a professional. I've just come through the tour school, and this is one of my first events. And he said, look, Dad's a busy man. I'm afraid it's not going to happen, Paul. There's a lot going on this week. Now, Nicklaus had designed that golf course, and that's why he was there playing it. And he'd obviously got an invite to Gary to come and play too. So roll on to Friday night. I'd made the cut, and I'm in my hotel room at 6 o'clock, kind of lying on the bed, getting ready to go down and meet all the Irish guys for dinner. And I get a phone call, and it's Gary. He said, Paul, Gary Nicklaus here. Look, he said, Dad has missed the cut. We're going to this restaurant. It's going to be Dad, his agent, and myself. And Dad said, you can come along. Do you fancy coming? So too right, I would. That was his. Look, restaurant doesn't open till 8:30 at night. And anyway, long story short, of course I went, and I remember the dinner vividly, and I still remember all the conversation at it, as long ago as it was. But what really struck with me at the end of the dinner, at kind of 1 o'clock in the morning when we were leaving, and Nicklaus had really enjoyed himself. He had a good few glasses of wine and had a couple of cigarettes along with it too, back in the days when he could smoke in a restaurant. We were in a little alcove at the back of the restaurant. But what struck me when we were leaving was he shook my hand and he said, Paul, you're starting out in your career. I want to wish you the very best of luck. But one thing you must remember about being a professional golfer, in my career, I've spent 90% of my time losing at this game and 10% winning. And I'm the most successful player that's ever played the game. So managing loss, managing losing, the resilience, that what you mentioned there in it coming through, that's a huge makeup of the world that I come from in professional golf. Because no matter how good you are, as good as you are as Jack Nicklaus, the greatest player ever played the game, 9 times out of 10 you're walking away having lost. So when you, and I'm particularly interested in when you were the captain of the Ryder Cup team, you had players there who would not like losing, other players like you that had become comfortable with failure. How did you tap into the players that played around you to get the best out of them and to remove the fear of failure? Because I think that's what holds so many people back in life. Isn't the fact they failed, it's the fact that before they even have a shot, they're fearful of the failure. Yeah, and we're all there. Certainly as golfers, we've all been there. Fear takes over all of us. We've all made massive mistakes under pressure. There's not a player who's played the game. It's not. It's such a difficult, multi-dimensional game that golf is. The Ryder Cup captaincy is a very unique thing in sport, and what makes it interesting for so many people, it's not just the best 12 players from America against the best 12 from Europe. What makes it so interesting, particularly in the business world as I moved into, and why business people become very interested in it, is that you're taking 12 individuals at the very top of their game from an individual sport and an individual background, and you're throwing them all together for 1 week every 2 years. And you have to manage that dynamic. You have to manage the egos. You have to manage the different skill sets that they have. Some players might be the best in the world, and other guys might be languishing 60, 70 in the world, and they're all part of the same team. And you've got to put it together. You've got to create the tactics. You've got to manage all the egos. And it's not a particularly easy place to be, as you can imagine. So that's what makes the captaincy so intriguing and so different. We can talk about it later if you want, but the real key for me was keeping them as individuals and not making them a team. I know that's contrary to a lot of things that people hear. I think team is overrated. I think it's got to start with the individual.
Sure. So before we explore that, Paul, I'm intrigued by going back further into your career where you were a Gaelic footballer up until you got the injury at the age of 19. Yeah. So what was your experience of being part of a team prior to then you taking over this captaincy?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's very much part of why I've excelled as a team more as a, although as a top 20 player in the world, I excel more in my roles. And 14 teams I represented Europe, and we won 13 of them. And my record was really good. My winning percentage was really high. I seemed to go to another level. I seemed to be unburdened as part of a team. And, I often ask myself that question, why? Why do I feel less pressure in the team? You hear all of the top players say, oh, I feel so much pressure in the Ryder Cup, Tiger Woods included. It's so difficult. You don't want to let your teammates down. And I'm looking, I'm thinking, well, actually, I felt the complete opposite to that. I felt unburdened and unshackled when I was part of a team. And I think a lot of it goes back to my days growing up in Dublin that we talked before we started here about, growing up in a very Catholic GAA background. GAA is a game in Ireland, very parochial game in Ireland. We've got 32 counties in Ireland, and it's a Gaelic football, it's called. And you have to play. You can only play for the county you're born in. So even though you get 85,000 people at these games, there's no transfers, nobody gets paid, and it's incredibly parochial. So you grow up as a young boy, whether it be in Dublin or County Cavan or County Donegal or Cork or wherever you may be, you grow up with a desire to represent the county and represent the county jersey, represent your people. Your aunties, your uncles, the guys you went to school with, the girlfriends you might have had through school. That's what you want to do. That's what drives you as a young person growing up in Ireland. And I think I've brought that into professional golf, and certainly when I was captain, it's one of the things that I wanted to bring into the team. Sergio Garcia was not there just representing a faceless blue flag of Europe. He was there representing Spain. Martin Keimer was there, and he was representing Germany. And the people tuning in from Germany to watch this Ryder Cup, Martin, as all they're interested in Europe, they are more interested in what Martin Keimer is doing. So, that's when you mentioned
made it
earlier.
clear to them, did you?
Absolutely.
You reminded them of that, because I'd imagine a lot of Ryder Cup captains would have put Europe at the top of the tree.
I made it about individual, Jake. I mean, I know it was contrary to what a lot of things you hear about teams, but I think I felt that these guys coming in an individual sport, to be honest, and I include myself in this, we're all quite selfish. You have to be. It has to be about you. You've got your own little team around you, your own little world around you. As much as you're playing against the golf course, you're also looking over your shoulder at everybody else as well. And it's all about you. You've nobody to bail you out. You've got you and your caddy, and your coach is not on the golf course with you. And you have to be very insular. You have to be very selfish, and you have to be very driven. Internally, you have to be very driven internally. Nobody else is going to motivate you. You've got to motivate yourself. Now, if you think about that, a lot of these players have escalated from the age of 13 with that mindset. And as they go up the ladder, they become even more so, more selfish, more about themselves. And the more successful they are, generally the more of those traits they have. So when I took over the Ryder Cup team, and something that I observed when I was a vice captain and when I played in the Ryder Cups, was that, this is not really about the team here. The real skill is dealing with them as individuals first and not making it too much about the team. Of course, the team is always relevant there, but the real way to engage their hearts that you mentioned there in the book, the real key is engaging their hearts and their minds and making it about them. And that's why most of my management was done. 98% of my management was done on a one-to-one basis.
And was that something that you had to learn as an individual golfer? Because again, I'm fascinated by you making that transition from having an injury, so having to leave a team sport to then go into an individual pursuit like golf. Did you have to learn to be selfish, learn to stop looking out for other people? Was that a skill?
It wasn't a skill. I think it was something. It was something, Damien, that you had to, sink or swim. If you weren't that way. I remember going to the tour school, for example, and being really nervous going out into the last day and being petrified to look at the scoreboard. I didn't want to get distracted. I put my head down. It's like putting your head down in a race, running as fast as you can, just constantly looking at the ground, not looking anywhere else. And then you go, okay, I'm through the finishing line. How did I do? And I think that was the start of it. And when I got on tour then, and you're mixing with all of these guys who think that way, and you start thinking that way.
Right, okay.
And you realize that is the way you've got to be. And, it is a real dog-eat-dog business, professional golf. It's a very, very difficult sport because, as I say, you don't have a real big team behind you. And there's so many skill sets involved in being a professional golfer. You know, it's not just the mental skill sets. You know, it's the physical ones. You've got to hit the ball straight. You've got to drive the ball straight. You've got to be a good iron player. You've got to be a good chipper. You've got to be a good putter. You've got to be a good bunker player. You know, you've got to, you know, all the other attributes that you got to do physically in terms of fitness, and then the mental ones on top of that. So you have to be on top of so many different skill sets in order to be successful.
Let's talk then about getting to the hearts of your players. We have so many different people listen to this podcast. It gets shared among a lot of both professional and amateur sports teams right across the world. Also, lots of business people and an incredible amount of teachers as well listen to this. And I think this could be really useful for people in a teaching setting where you've got 30 kids and you're trying to get to their hearts, not to their heads. So when you were there with those 12 players in front of you, what tools did you use to get to the hearts of those players?
It's about communication. That's where you start and that's where you end more than anything else. That's the number one fundamental, and your relationship with those players. And you've got to know them intimately as individuals and people as much as you need to know them as golfers. I mean, I can find out in the morning, if you give me an hour, I can give you a background on any professional golfer in the world. I just know exactly where to trawl into, get their statistics, find out their strengths, find out their weaknesses, make a couple of phone calls, and within an hour I can tell you exactly where the person is as a golfer. But the real key to managing that person is knowing them as individuals. What's their family situation like? Where are they coming from in their background? You know, where do they live? Are they
what would you do with them then? Martin Keimer, let's take him as or anyone you choose. So, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, the guy I use, is Victor Dubuisson. So we had a guy called Victor Dubuisson on the team who was French. Very charismatic, but very, very quiet, and incredibly shy, and very much an outlier. And all the French guys who were on tour in advance of the Ryder Cup were telling me, you got a problem with this guy, Paul. This guy's difficult. This guy, you know, was kicked off for the French Federation as an amateur. You know, he didn't wear the right uniforms. If you tell him black, he'll do white. He won't toe the line. You know, he could well turn up with the wrong clothes any one day. If you ask him to do something, he might say no. Team meetings are going to be a trouble. I mean, they raised all kinds of red flags for him. So that was a great heads up from those guys. So I made it my business. I'd played with Victor a number of times on tour, and so I kind of knew his game. I knew his game, what his skill set was, and a fabulous player he was. So I made it my business to get him known as an individual. And I remember he played in Malaysia. I travelled out to Malaysia where he played to have a week with him. He was playing in a team event out there called the Royal Trophy. And I got him integrated into that. And I wanted him, I spent every night with him. Sometimes it was only for 10 minutes. Sometimes it was for an hour. But I wanted to get him to know me, and I wanted to get to know him as well. And it didn't start with, you know, me going in there and telling him what we're going to do. It was very much of getting his confidence in me.
So was it quite casual to start with?
Very,
it was just
very casual, over a glass of wine, breaking him down. I mean, and he was a very quiet guy. He was very difficult, to be honest, very difficult to break down. But at the end of the week, I got to know him a bit, and I'd formed some ideas about him. And you know, without going too personally into his background, you know, it was a difficult background that he'd come from, and a lot of his behaviours were a result of this difficult background that he grew up in. And so I figured out then one of the things that he loved more than anything, and this is where our friend is going to come into this, Eddie Jordan. I figured that his one passion, even more so than golf, was Formula One. He loved Formula One. And so when I got back, I rang Eddie and I said, look, I need a favour. He said, what's the favour? I said, look, this French guy, Dubuisson, I said, he loves Formula One. And, you know, you'd be a big hero to him. I said, what about we have dinner with him or invite him down to your boat one day? Yeah, no problem. Let me know what date and blah. So anyway, long story short, we got a date and we went down to Monaco, flew down to Monaco, and Eddie was on the boat, and my wife came with me. We're good friends with Eddie Marie, and we had Victor on. He came along with his friend. He brought a beautiful bottle of wine. We had a lovely dinner together on Eddie's boat, and a nice bottle of wine, bit of fun. And I gave a couple of key messages to Eddie that he, as he went off and kind of spoke to him on a personal level, and Eddie spoke about me to him, about, you know, where we were coming from, and just building that relationship. And cut a long story short, we got him. He was great, and he loved Eddie. We was great fun, and we broke him down. We had a great fun with him. And so now I've got a relationship going with him, and the last couple of months were easy. And now I've got to think, right, now I've got to fit this guy into the team. So what I did in the last few months was I identified that he needs somebody senior to be his partner on the team. You know, I couldn't put him in with another rookie. He needed a real mature senior guy, and I highlighted Graham McDowell as that guy. So something that hadn't been done before was I controlled the draws on the European Tour during the whole summer. So every time Graham came over from America to play in a European Tour event, he mysteriously was drawn with Victor, unbeknown to him, but I never told him why. I just wanted to see if they would get on. I wanted the caddies to get to know each other, and I wanted them to form a relationship with each other and spend a bit of time together, unbeknown to them that they could be playing the Ryder Cup. I did this with a number of other guys as well. Some worked and some didn't, but in advance I was clear then as to which pairings were well, that's got potential or that doesn't, because it's important that there's a synergy between the two of them. Not just that they get on well, but they understand each other's games, and the caddies get on. The caddies are very important dynamic. So we moved on from that, and eventually I sit down with Graham at the end of the summer, a couple of weeks before the Ryder Cup, and tried to explain to Graham about the role I want him to play, and that I wanted to play with Victor, and he's not happy that he wants to play with Victor. He said, well, look, you know, I want to play with Rory, or I want to play with Sergio, and I want to play 5 games. I want to be, you know, hold a win a putt in 2010. You know, I want to, you know, I really feel like I'm one of the senior guys in the team, and I want to do that. So I've got to manage that situation with him to bring him in with Victor, and that's what I did. And it was a bit of a carrot and a stick with him. If you do this, play with him. And then I explained why he needs to play with Victor, and not just because of the maturity, also that the golf course and the data came into it. Then I explained the data and about, you know, there was the foursomes, the alternate shot. There was 5 holes that were even numbers. That were either par 5s or drivable par 4, and I wanted a big hitter to hit it on that, and he wasn't a big hitter, whereas Victor was, and it would work that way. And then if he would do that and be fresh and only play 1 round the first 2 days, I'd put him out number 1 in the singles, and you know, that was playing to his ego then at that stage, because you know, he's a great player. I knew he could handle the position of going out and leading in the singles, and so got him inside, so molded him into it. And so that's just one example of dealing with a player who was new to the Ryder Cup situation, hadn't played before, and was difficult. And he turned out he won all 3 of his games. He won 2.5 out of 3. He probably would have won his 3, and he was a big star and very welcomed and a big part of the team. So that's just, I've given you one example there, but you can multiply that by 12.
That's a brilliant illustration, Paul, of how there's a real balance there between the science and the art of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that when you spoke to Graham, you could give him plenty of rationale about, on these 5 holes, this is where your strength is. But there's something about the art of looking at the dynamics, almost like the difficult things to be able to quantify. How would you describe that balance is then as a leader between the science of leading and the art of sometimes just using your intuition? So
with the science, one of the things that I did in 2014 was employ a full-time data team. We'd never had that before in the Ryder Cup. I was the first captain to do that on either team. And I employed a company called strokeaverage.com that did a number of stats on tour for players individually as well. We're well up to date with it. Now, guys who do stats and data, I'm sure you know, they're kind of very nerdy kind of guys. They love numbers and they could talk for hours and hours. I'm not that kind of guy. I wanted simplicity, I wanted clarity. And every meeting I had with them, I only gave them a limited space of 15 minutes, end of, and 1 page. I don't want to know millions of things. There's a great line from Corey Pavin, who was the captain in 2010. I never forgot it. And he wasn't really relating to data, but he was talking about something else. And his line was, always make the big thing the big thing. Easy to get distracted with data. And, you know, we hear a lot about the 1%, marginal gains, you know, the 1% here, the 1% there. And as much as, yeah, that's kind of important, but never forget the big things. And sometimes we lose trace of the big things. So when I was talking to these data guys, I don't want to know the minutiae. We're going to get lost if we go down that road. Give me the big correlations. So one of the things they came back to me, number one, because we played the Johnny Walker on that golf course in Glen Eagles. I'm a great guy in preparing. The exam in golf is different every week you have because of the golf course. I wanted to know, what is the exam in Glen Eagles? What skill set do you need to unlock that? What is the common denominator and the correlation between the last 10 years of the Johnny Walker up there to the guys who have won? What have they done best? And one of the things that was highlighted was the par 5s. Their scoring average in the par 5s were better than anybody else. Now, that's not always the case, but for there it was. So one of the things that I traced in my 2 years of captaincy was par 5 scoring average. But I'm not telling this to the players. I'm keeping it all internally here. And hence, when it came to the foursomes, the alternate shot, I had to attack the par 5s. Hence, back to the story of Graham, who's a shorter hitter, being put with a bigger hitter. So a yin and a yang. Every pairing had a big hitter with and I integrated a shorter hitter with a big hitter. And because 4 of the 5 holes were even numbers, they were to hit. The big hitter was to hit on the even numbers. But of course, I never said that publicly. I never even said it to the players. It was what I was doing behind the scenes. I was afraid of it leaking out and the Americans finding out the edge, and then they would, counteract that. So I had to make sure that it was a very, very close number of people who knew that.
I love that though. I think there's a real skill in, like they often talk about in Hollywood, when if you're going to pitch an idea for a film, they talk about the bluff, which is an acronym that stands for give me the bottom line up front. Just tell me what the film's about. Don't tell me who's going to be in it or any of the detail. Just give me the premise of what the film's about. So there's a famous one of the Indiana Jones trilogy is James Bond with a hat and a whip. Now that tells you everything you need to know about the film and the consequences. So how important is simplicity for you as a leader to be able to just give this bottom line up front of this is what we're going to do?
I think it's massive, absolutely massive. Simplicity and clarity. More than anything else, that's my communication with the players. And that's why my team meetings every night at 9 o'clock were no longer than 10 minutes. You don't want to confuse anybody. And there's only so much you can say to Rory McIlroy, who's the best player in the world, to Stephen Gallagher, who was the last guy in the team and his ranking was down around 50 in the world. There's only so much you can say that's going to relate to everybody. Because ultimately they're going out tomorrow playing their own match. And that's the other difficulty about being a Ryder Cup captain is, remember, there's not one arena. There's 4 consecutive arenas going on at the same time. So as a captain, you got to keep your eye on all 4 of those. And one of the reasons why I actually wasn't on the golf course much, I watched most of it on TV, because there's only so much. I mean, the one thing I hated as a player when I played Ryder Cup is you're playing along and you're in your zone 4, 5, 6 holes. Next of all, a cart comes along, a blue cart of the captain comes flying up onto the hill, and he starts watching you, and it just unnerves you a little bit. I don't think it's a positive. It's all of a sudden when the captain comes who hasn't been there, all of a sudden you play better. I think that's highly unusual. So I made it my business to keep out of the damn way. And as I said to the players, when you get in the golf course, and certainly the caddies, I had a meeting with the caddies every night as well, before I had a meeting with the players, separately with the caddies. And what I promised them was, I will not get involved in any communication with any of the players during play.
Wow.
Which is, again, other captains did different. And the important thing, and I heard it in one of your podcasts as well too before, I forget who said it, there's no one way of doing this, and you've got to figure out what's best for you. And I knew that me going up to Rory McIlroy in the middle of the 9th fairway and saying, Rory, just be careful with the wind here because, just watch the game in front and they kind of misjudge it. All they're going to do is confuse Rory. Rory's the best player in the world. He'd won 2 major championships that year. Him and his caddy had obviously made brilliant decisions to do that. Why do I want to contaminate that dynamic? So I kept out of the way. And that was all the communication I get to the players and particularly the caddies. Now, the caddies felt really empowered because of that. That's great, that nobody's going to come in and kind of take care of the business that we do and do so well. The one rider I put to them was, if I need to speak to the player for something, if something comes up and I do need to speak to the player for a reason, I'm going to speak to you guys first, speak to the caddy first, and you let me know when is a good time that I can speak to the player. So that caddy-player dynamic, which happens, so it goes back to the individual over the team. It was important that I preserved the dynamic that got them to be the best players in the world. And that is a player and caddy in the golf course. And it's not by somebody sitting over their shoulder and giving them advice.
What I love about this, though, is that actually you're doing the best thing to try and win the Ryder Cup, right? But you're also taking quite a big personal risk, because the easiest thing for you to do is to say, well, I just did exactly what the previous captain of the Ryder Cup did and it was okay for them and they did the same as... For you to come in and go, I'm going to be brave enough and bold enough to do this my way, and I'm going to rewrite rules that have been written for decades of how you operate in the capacity as a Ryder Cup captain. That is a brave personal decision, isn't it? It puts you in a vulnerable position in some ways if you're not successful.
Yeah, I was basing it on my own personal experiences, Jake. I've played in 3 Ryder Cups and I was always 6 to 12 in the team. I was never a superstar in the team. So I knew what it was like for 6 to 12, the guy 6 to 12. I was that guy, I was that soldier. I could relate to it. And, we've all very similar feelings to it. And I based a lot of what I did on that. Now, I also worked, one of the things I talked about a lot, and one of the challenges, I had a number of challenges when I come on as captain, because I kind of broke the mold a little bit insofar as I wasn't a major winner and I wasn't a superstar in any of the team. I wasn't one of the better players on the 3 Ryder Cup teams that I played. So normally the captains elevated from one of those two things. They were normally the better players. And as much as I say I was a successful player and top 20 in the world, I wasn't the superstar of the game. So when I became Ryder Cup captain, it was a little bit of breaking the mold that I would be voted to be the captain. So one of the ways I had to get credibility with the players. And it wasn't through my playing career. Bernard Langer walks into a room, he's got the attention straight away because he's Bernard Langer and what he's won. Sevi walks into a room, Nick Faldo walks into a room. All those guys walk into a room, they walk in with credibility because of what they've achieved. I hadn't achieved that standard that they had, so I had to find credibility in other ways. And I did that with my professional and personal relationships with the players, and also my press conferences. They were very important. When I spoke publicly, I realized I was also speaking to the players, and I saw that as me on it, really well prepared for my press conference and getting some key messaging out, knowing the players were going to watch it. And one of the messages that I really got out was a template, which is a little bit contrary to the point you just made there, is that, look, I've been involved in 14 teams, or at that stage 13, and we'd won 12. I had been in either playing under, who captained by, or I had captained all the greats of European golf of the last 3 decades, whether that be Seve Ballesteros, whether it be Nick Faldo, whether it be Ian Woosnam, whether it be Bernard Langer, whether it be Rory McIlroy, wherever you want to go, I've either played under them as a captain or I had captained them myself. I said, there is a template. I see what the template to success is and why we're so dominant in the Ryder Cups in Europe. Of course, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I know what it is, and that's how I'm going to captain.
That's you asking for trust, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a public forum.
Pretty much. And also the fact that I've got it. For them to trust me, I've got it. Mightn't have the playing record, but again, we can talk about that more, and it's got a little bit in my bottle about this. Show me the correlation between the better the player, the better the captain. There's no correlation.
Well,
Wherever you want to go.
Let's link it to another sport, football.
Yeah.
Arsene Wenger, not a great player, great manager.
Alex
Ferguson, I know you're very close with, wasn't a great footballer. What was the biggest lesson you learned from Sir Alex?
I learned a couple of them. Let me just kind of talk a little bit about my relationship with him. So basically, when I became captain, I sat down really honest with myself and wrote down what my traits were and also where my weaknesses were, and focused on my weaknesses. What have I got to do here? One of them was the credibility thing, so I had a little strategy for that. One of them was I was a 6-12 player in the 3 Ryder Cups I played. I was that soldier. I can manage 6-12 easily. I know exactly how they feel. I know exactly what it's like when the captain says you're only playing 3 matches out of 5, or you're playing 2 out of 5, or you're not playing tomorrow morning. I was there, and I'm going to have empathy for all of those guys. I was never a superstar. So one of the things I wanted to find out was, how do you manage superstars? How do you manage Rory McIlroy? He's the best player in the world. He's won 2 majors this year. So that was one challenge. Another one was communication to the players. How do you give a player bad news? How do you deliver it to keep them on side for the next session? I sat down, I thought about these things, and Ferguson had Alex, I should call him, Sir Alex, I should call him, had retired the year before, and I'd played golf with him 10 years previously in a Pro-Am, but I hadn't seen him in the 10 years. So I got his phone number and I got hold of him initially through email, and then I called him, and he was like, look, Paul, he said, look, I'm busy, look, I've just retired, I have a lot going on, I don't know if this is going to be right for me, and I said, look, would you mind if we just met? If I could come up to Manchester and just meet you for lunch, would that be okay? He said, okay, look, he said, come up. There's a little hotel I use in Alderley Edge for my meetings. Let's come there and fly up. And if you make your way there, I'll have lunch with you. And we got a date, and then I went. And I had all my notebook out and prepared. We sat down, we had lunch. And I had to basically tell him the idea that, A, I just wanted to pick his brain on a couple of things. And B, I wanted him to talk to the players on the Tuesday night. We normally had a guest speaker in. I thought he would be good. So as we sat down and I went through the different challenges that I had and explained my overall plan to him of what I was doing, I could see that I was getting him on side. And now all of a sudden it was, this time, okay. And I could see that I was getting his confidence, that I wasn't bluffing my way through here and I wasn't on an ego trip, that I was genuinely prepared and interested to know what his answers were. But they were very specific. It wasn't a question of what do I do with this? And this is, to answer your question, this is what was so brilliant about him. So, for example, Rory McIlroy, right? Best player in the world, number one player at the time. And I said, look, I've been on the, I explained where I come from, and bam, bam, bam. The really greats, Ronaldo, Beckham, the Giggs. You're going into a big game, big championship game, or a big European game. How do you manage them? What do you say in the media? What do you say to them personally? What kind of pressure are they going to be under? What are they going to feel? What are the rest of the players going to feel about them? There's going to be more pressure on them. What do you do? And this is your answer. This is where he was so clever. Every time I asked him a question, he said, "What do you think?" Before I answered that, what do you think? And then I said, well, I'm asking you. I mean, that's why I'm not. No. He says, you've got an instinct. Come on, you've captained before. What do you think? And I said, well, I was thinking this and I was thinking that. And he went, that's fabulous. That's absolutely what you should do. Can I just add that maybe just do this when you're doing that, just put that on the back of it. So what he was doing was answering the question, but also empowering me. I was walking out of those meetings with him thinking, I met him twice, thinking I was 10 foot tall. You know, he had empowered me that I was on the right tracks here. So that's
it's a
what
lovely
he did.
management technique. That
he was managing me. He was playing me.
He's still stitching in the information by saying a little bit to add, but making you feel great.
Yeah, it was very clever.
Yeah.
But I also read an interview where that was a similar technique that is it Alatabal did with you when you went and asked him for advice. That he would ask you, what would you do? What's your instinct for this? Is that a consistent trait that you found with mentors and coaches, to use that term?
Yeah, because your instinct is always, your instinct is important. And if you're giving advice to somebody, it's important to get their instinct first. I feel if you're managing somebody, what do they think? For example, when I was talking to the players about potential partners, I never started with, this is what you want to do, this is who you're going to play with, this is what you think. I think it's important that you get the feedback from them first, and then you work it and you tailor it in that way, because it's like, even like when I play in a Pro-Am, and I'm playing with a handicapped golfer, and he says, Paul, what do you think? Can you read this putt for me? And I look at the putt and I'll say, right, it's a ball outside right lip. But I won't say it to him. I say, what do you think? He says, well, I think it's going to come right to left. I says, yeah, I think it is too. How much do you think? He says, well, maybe 3 balls. I said, maybe not quite that much, but I like your idea. It's coming. So basically, he's now doing what he sees himself.
Is that how you manage the superstars then, like the Rorys? Would you use that technique with them?
Yeah, very much so. It's got to come from them. They've got to be bought into it, and their ideas are really important. And the authoritarian, this is what you're going to do. Managing millennials, if you want to call them, or people of this era, you can't. I don't feel. I wasn't authoritarian. I was very unified in consulting. In terms of my captaincy, it wasn't now sometimes I had to box a bit clever. If they said this and I really didn't want that, I had to move them into another place.
Yep.
And I did that on a number of occasions.
How would you do that?
By not making a decision right there and then. Saying, look, let me sleep on this. Let's come back to us in another day. I mean, we've got some examples of that as well too. There was Padraig Harrington was a vice captain of mine. Sergio Garcia was on the team. Padraig and Sergio didn't see eye to eye. I grew up with Padraig. He's a great friend of mine. I knew he was going to be really valuable to me as a vice captain. I wanted him in the team room, but Sergio was on the team, and there was obviously bad blood between them. That was quite clear. It was publicly in there. But before I could ask Padraig to be, I had to clear it with Sergio. And it initially started with a no, but over a period of a couple of weeks, we got to a place where it would be fine. And then they came into the team room, and because the boundaries were set, they were brilliant. They got on great. There was no problem. And now, they're back normal, good friendship with each other. And so, you've got to work it a bit way, and you've got to give yourself time, Jake. I mean, to be impulsive and demand the players to do something, you're pulling them away from that environment and that you want them to be in to perform. So I saw my job as a captain of give clarity, give simplicity, create a really strong environment, inspire them, and then get the hell out of the way.
I love your criteria of things that you were looking at in terms of how do you handle a superstar, and I think you've given us some fascinating insights there. What did you learn about delivering bad news then?
Always have some good news to go with the bad news. For example, that example I gave earlier is a really good one with Graham. Sitting down with Graham, big ego, former US Open champion, hero the last time we played at home, played in the last match, won the last match when we needed it to win, when Monty was captain. I was a vice captain there. Coming in as a senior guy, expecting to play all 5 matches, me seeing him in a different role where I wanted to look after Victor in the foursomes, only play once the first 2 days. But being prepared with my conversation with him that, look, if you do this and play with Victor the first 2 days, the carrot at the end of the stick will be, I'll put you out number 1 in the singles. I really believe the street fighters are best number 1s, not the best player. His immediate thought was, what will Rory say if I'm playing number 1? I mean, at that stage as well, I mean, you talk about managing dynamics, and again, this is all public knowledge, but Rory and Graham were in the High Court against each other at the time with a management dispute that was going on either sides of the fence. So I was managing that situation at the same time too. So, you know, there's always challenges you go on, and it's important that you keep your independence as a manager of both players, and that's important. I didn't take sides in that regard. So immediately when I said, we'll put you out number 1, and this is well in advance of the Ryder Cup. This is not a decision the night before. It was important the players had real clarity well before the week started as to what the role was, in my opinion, because that's what I wanted. So they could prepare in that way, because remember, they're individuals more than anything else. And it's not a case of going in. There's enough turmoil going on during the week of it when they have to blend and eat with people and do things that they normally do without putting in the turmoil of decisions being made at the last minute. So that's why decisions and clarity had to be given earlier. So the carrot at the end of the stick was, I'll put you out number 1 in the singles, because I believe the street fighters are best at number 1, and this is what I genuinely believed. And you're a best street fighter in the team. Again, every single thing I said to any player, I believed it. It wasn't BS, because I knew we can all smell BS. We can all smell it. And if somebody's giving us the BS, we're going to smell it. He's just playing me here. And it was important that I didn't do that. And Graham knows he's a big heart. He knows that. He knows we all regard him in the game as one of the ballsiest players in the game. Not the most talented, but certainly the ballsiest. And I was playing, that's the dynamic I wanted as number 1. And that's what he did. And then the final thing I said to get him over the line was, Graham, you can be guaranteed the Americans are going to do 1 or 2 things for the number 1 player in the singles. They're either going to A, put out their best player, or B, put out a player who's playing the best. And the chances are that player who's playing the best will have played 72 holes over the first 2 days. You've only played 36. You're going to be fresh against whoever you play. So the job was done, and off he went. He played with Victor. They were absolutely fabulous together. They won both of their matches comfortably, and then he went on to a singles and beat Jordan Spieth in the singles.
Because your job really is to make them confident without being complacent.
Absolutely.
And there's a great story in your book when you talk about the difference between 2002 and 2012, and you talk about whether expecting to win is dangerous. Yeah. Can you talk to us about that?
Oh, that's the big key. Expectation is a difficult place to be. A very, very difficult place to be. And in 14, when I was a captain, we were probably, it was kind of even money as the favourites. And before, we were always underdogs. So again, Alex Ferguson, that was one of the questions I had for him as well too. As I say, I went up to him prepared with my challenges of where we were weak as a team, or where I was weak as a captain, and get some insights from him. And one of them was this thing about expectation. And he talked to me about redirecting the mindsets to be the hunter and not the hunted. You've got to create. It's much easier to be the hunter than the person who's been hunted. It's much easier to be coming this way. A shark attacks from the bottom in the ocean. He comes upwards. It's much easier to be going that way. Trying to defend in the lead on the last day in a golf tournament for anybody. Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods will tell you the hardest thing to do is defend a lead on the last day. If you're having a good day and things are going for you and you're moving up the leaderboard, you don't feel the same pressure. But if you're out there and you have a 3-shot lead and everybody's expecting you to win, it's tough to place. Again, going back to the conversation with Nicklaus, before I answer that question, it's a really good point. Going back to the conversation with Nicklaus when I had dinner with him, one of the questions I had for him was, who is your toughest competitor? because I love the competitiveness of golf, of all sport. That's what really stirs me. It's not the fancy, wonderful shots. It's the heart. It's the balls. It's the grinding inside. And Watson was always my hero. And you know, I wanted him to say Watson because of all the matches he'd played against Watson head to head, and Watson got the better of him in '77 in Turnberry. And I wanted him to say Watson, and he didn't. He said my toughest competitor was Lee Trevino. So of course, remember, there's only 4 of us at the table here, and Gary's hearing these for the first time too, as is his manager. So really, Trevino? Why Trevino? He says, I'll tell you why. And he took a big, let's just see it so vividly. He took a big drink of his wine, he put it down, and he took about 10, 15 seconds, which felt like an eternity. And he goes, you know why? That used to go in to the press conferences and play the underdog all the time against me. And all he would say is, I'm just a little Mexican here from a really poor area trying to make it against the great Jack Nicklaus. Listen, folks, if you want to see the greatest player in the game ever play, go out tomorrow and watch this guy. Jack Nicklaus hits a 2-iron harder than I hit a wedge. This guy is phenomenal. Just come and watch this guy play tomorrow. This guy is sensational. This is the greatest player the game is ever going to see. By the end of his career, he'll have won more majors than anybody else. You know, don't miss out on history, guys. You've got to go and see it. You know? And Nicklaus said, I never reacted, but every time I played Trevino, and I couldn't tell him because that was shown away, but I always felt under pressure against him. So going back to your question and going back to the question again, going into Ferguson, not telling him that story, but asking him about the same thing. And he talked about reframing, and he talked about, you know, what drove him every year when they won the championship at Man United was, that's over, lads, we're still chasing Liverpool. Look how many championships Liverpool have got. Man United haven't got as many.
Right, so even when Man United were 15 points, 20 points clear in the Premier League, his mindset to the players is, we might be ahead this year, but we're talking about a war, not a battle, and they're still ahead in the number of trophies they've won.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So what I did, Jake, was I'm a very visual person.
Yeah.
I employed a guy called Nick Bradley, who's a golf coach, but also an unbelievable artist. And the 6 challenges that we faced, I got them represented. As much as I was going to talk to them in the 10-minute meetings every night and reference them, as much as I was getting insights from Ferguson that were staying with me, as much as I was sharing them with the vice captains and they would talk about them to the players, I was keeping it all simple and clarity down to those 6 challenges. I had massive images that represented each one of these challenges, and I had them positioned around the interior of our team rooms, whether it be the meeting room, whether it be the corridors walking down to their bedrooms, or whether it be the locker rooms. I had these massive images, and picture that they were probably 2-3 meters by 3 meters, massive.
Be the rock when the storm comes.
That was one of them, yeah. That was about resilience, yeah. But the one that I had behind me, I had a lectern in the team meeting room. I wanted to be a really small, intimate room. And it was a really small room. I had a horseshoe couch where the players sat on. Actually, in the book, you see the picture. That's in the team room. That's the horseshoe. Ferguson was sitting in the middle of them. And then at the back were the 5 vice captains sitting on stools, and really strong imagery around. And the carpet was done in the European colours. And I spent a lot of money in interior design. I'm a great believer in creating the platform and the environment to be inspired in. But behind my lectern, which had the Ryder Cup logo on it, that I get my meeting every night in my notebook on, was this huge big image. And it was a faceless hand holding the Ryder Cup. We call it the Roll of Honour. And out of that was a big scroll, a gold Roll of Honour. And represented on that was every year, every edition of the Ryder Cup since 1927, and a flag beside it as to who won. So the point being, as you get, and obviously told this to the players, as you get towards the end and you look at recent, I think we'd won 7 of the previous 9 when I was captain. That's what brought the expectation. And as you go, you can see of the last 9 editions, there's 7 blue flags. The point being, yes, guys, yeah, look, we've won 7 of the last 9, but look how much American flag is over here. We're chasing them. They're not chasing us.
So you're removing the expectation.
We're going on the front foot. We're not going on the back foot defending here at home. We're on the front foot. We are chasing down the might of America, the dominance that they've had in the history of the game.
But what I love about that image and the other very visual images that you described is, it wasn't a gimmick. So, you go into some gyms or some clubs and they've got like bland motivational quotes on the wall, like winners never quit and quitters never win and things like that actually don't mean anything. I think what you did was you took it to that next level of making it very, very specific to the immediate challenge that they were facing.
It's got to tie in, Damien, and it's got to be really simple and really clear, because not the mistake, but the tendency and the easy thing you can do when you become a captain is talk too much and create so many areas. Go back to the point that Corey Pavin made in different reference. Make sure the big thing is the big thing. And I wanted to have big things and constantly focus on the big things. And as much as marginal gains in this world are important, I'm not particularly interested in marginal gains at this stage. If I get the big things in place, we'll win.
See, there's an athletic correspondent, a guy called Vern Gambetta, that's regarded as a legend in the world of sort of like health and fitness. And as you're talking, Paul, I'm getting memories of what he talks about. He says, forget marginal gains, just be brilliant at the basics. That's 99% of performance, is just getting the basics right.
The fundamentals.
Yeah, the fundamentals, and I'm hearing that come across really loud and clear.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what Jack Nicklaus, if you ask him what the secret to his success was, he said strong fundamentals.
Right.
You know, but that's in a technical sense. But also I think in managing a team and going back to the word of template, you know, I identified what the template was, what we did in Europe and all the teams that I was involved in, and lucky to be involved in so much success. What did we do? And I dragged them out. And on one side of the page, I had our challenges. On the other side of the page, I had what did we do? What was the template? And number one, more than anything else, number one, and the thing that I referenced when we brought everybody from the interior, those 72 people behind the scenes as part of the European team that week, from doctors and physios and coaches and caddies and players. And when I did the initial talk on the Monday night welcoming everybody, message I wanted to get across, and number one fundamental, is fun. If we think that this is the most important thing we're ever going to do in our lives, we're not going to perform. We're going to be tight with expectation. We've got to remove that.
I struggle with that a bit, because I love watching the Ryder Cup. And I love watching the Ryder Cup because I love the ruthlessness when it really bloody matters up against the opposition. So you've created this beautiful sort of family atmosphere. It's really caring. You've spent time getting to know your golfers. You've got to their heart, not to their head. You've paired them with people that you know work. You've solved rifts that have been going on for years. You've had Sir Alex Ferguson coming in to lift them up. You've created a caring atmosphere. But when it matters and you're 10 feet away from holding a putt to win the Ryder Cup for Europe, you need to be ruthless. Where did that come in?
So this comes into performance. I'm talking now as a performer. My own experience as a performer. And absolutely ruthless. Absolutely couldn't agree more with you on the ruthlessness. I'm a great believer in that. Like I said earlier, I love the heart, the balls, that kind of player. I'm absolutely all over that more than anything else. But as a performer, if you go on and try too hard, I spent too much of my career, my own personal career, trying too hard. And interesting listening to Johnny Wilkinson in your earlier thing, and it absolutely resonated with me. If you go in burdened with tightness of, I want to do this so badly it hurts, you're not going to perform. There's got to be a freedom there. And for me, that element of fun is what unburdens you. I'll just give you a little example. How I was captained brilliantly by Sam Torrance in my first Ryder Cup, without going into the whole story. Sam gave me a huge role on the Sunday at number 9 in the singles, because he felt that was going to be an important position if we were going to win. And I was playing Jim Furyk. And imagine, the Ryder Cup's on the line, 18th hole in the Belfry. The wind is blowing hard right to left. I've missed the green left with a 3-iron. Jim has missed it left. There's 50,000 people around this hole. The Ryder Cup is on the line. And I'm incredibly nervous as I'm walking up to the bridge, having hit quite a poor second shot under pressure. I walk up to the bridge, and Sam Torrance, the captain, was leaning on the bridge with his arms folded, with his sweater on kind of over his shoulders. And as I got to the bridge, looked up at him, he stared at me with this massive smile on his face. Massive smile, under incredible pressure. And it was like, as I got to him, he put his arm on my shoulder, walked across the bridge at me, said, do this for me, do this for your teammates. Up and down, we win the Ryder Cup. Now, rather than getting off the other side of the bridge thinking, oh my God, I felt the opposite. I felt so unburdened. And I felt exhilarated. And I felt empowered that I had so much potential fun inside of me I could create so much fun for so many people by doing it.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And as a result, I chipped it up and I hold a putt. And I hold that putt with so much freedom, almost to the point that I didn't care if I hold it. Now, that's a great place. Talk to any really elite athlete. That's when you perform your best. When you almost don't care. You're so caught up in the moment of doing what you need to do that you're not result-oriented. You are performance-oriented.
The total opposite of when Johnny Wilkinson said, I thought that struggling and sacrificing and finding things difficult would create the great moment. He realised all that does is create more struggle and more sacrifice.
Stress, tightness.
Exactly. And he said, if it's not about you, he said, when kickers walk up, as you've heard, as soon as you walk up to take a kick and you're the fly half, suddenly you struggle, you get tight because it's about you.
Absolutely.
And you're talking about having freedom in that key moment.
As a performer.
Yeah.
Now, so I was... So this element, this fun thing was not about us drinking every night and playing table tennis and all like having a laugh, the greatest laugh. No. It wasn't about that. Fun was about on the golf course when we're out there. This is not life or death situation. The old Bill Shankly line, football's not a matter of life or death. Whether he said it or not, I don't know. But that's the worst thing you can be as a performer. It's far more important than that. That's the worst thing you can be as a performer, that you're actually relating death to what you do as a performer. No, if you take it that serious, you're not going to play any good. My experience of being an elite performer, my own self of playing in some big high-pressure situations, it was never life or death. But when it was too important to me, that's when I performed my worst.
Yeah, we spend all of our time telling our kids in important moments, don't have too much fun, take it seriously. I say it to my daughter all the time, right, today, take it seriously. Maybe we need to reframe all our thinking in those big moments for our kids. Hey, enjoy it. Have fun with it.
It's the fun of the challenge. I mean, it's not to be dismissive. It's important to get it right now. Now, it's still focused. It's still driven. But you're not obsessed by the result. You're so prepared.
How can you not be obsessed by the result, though, if you can win the Ryder Cup for Europe?
Because you're in the moment. You're not thinking about where the ball's going to finish. You're thinking about where you are now, what you're going to do to execute. And that's the moment that I was in at the moment when I hold that winning putt. I mean, I keep going back to that because that was peak performance. Those couple of seconds that I was in when I hit that putt was absolute in the zone peak performance. And I've gone back to that so many times, wanting to recreate it so many times.
You keep trying to get there again during your career.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And I think that's where I wanted the team to be in that position of unburden. I mean, just bringing it forward a little bit, another example of it, in that same Ryder Cup, on the Saturday night, I was playing with Darren Clark. We were the last game on the golf course. It was really important that we didn't lose this match. If we lost the match, we were going to be going down into the singles, which was going to be very difficult for us because America were much stronger than us. So we really needed to get at least a half match for the team. Myself and Darren were playing. I think Scott Hoken might have been Furyk as well. Came to the 16th hole. We're the last game on the golf course. We're one down, and I've got this 6-footer to go all square for a birdie. And picture the scene. It's 10 deep around the green. We're the last game on the course. Everything's focused on it. TV cameras, everything. Everybody's watching, all the captains, the vice captains, everybody's there. And as I'm weighing and walking around the green looking at the putt, for some reason, something above came down and said to me, wow, if you hold this putt, there's 30,000 people here going to go ballistic. Now, instead of thinking, oh my God, I hope I don't miss. I hope, I really need to make this putt. We can't lose this game. I was thinking about making everybody shout and scream. And I hit that putt with almost a smile on my face.
Brilliant.
That when it went in, and then I interacted so much with the crowd. If you look at the thing, I was giving everybody the fist as they were walking off the green. And that engagement, that energy from the crowd was coming into me, and I was giving it back to them. And so I was unburdened. So moving on again to the captaincy and what I learned, another one of my big images that I created was one of Justin Rose when he hold a huge important putt. He had his hands outstretched and we photoshopped it to basically, one of the things I hated as a player, and ex-players are great at this, is putting the fear factor in. Oh my God, the first tee in a Ryder Cup. Oh my God, all you want to do is, you can't even tee the ball up. All you want to do is make contact. The first tee is so nerve-wracking. There's 30,000 people around the tee and you don't want to screw it up. And oh my God, you're thinking, oh my God, I hope I don't shank it. And you're thinking all of these things. Yep. No, that's not what I wanted anybody to be. I created a big image where with Justin was, no, stand on that first tee, look down the fairway, and just think, there's 30,000 people around this tee that are going to scream because we're playing at home when you hit it down the middle. So feel empowered and hit your best shot you ever had, and just wait for the roar.
So what would you say to people listening to this who struggle with self-doubt in big moments?
Self-doubt is my amateur psychology. Self-doubt is because you're into the result and not into the process of what you're doing. You're too much result oriented. You've got to create fun in what you're doing. There's got to be fun. There's got to be you got to be unburdened to be a real high performer and elite performer. The best high performers are energized. Sometimes it's the situation that energizes them. Sometimes it's the competitiveness. I mean, Jack Nicklaus's line was, "I never really loved golf, but I love the competition." You know, so what's gonna float your boat? What's gonna tick your box? What is it that makes you? Because everybody's different. You got to find out what is it that makes you going to perform at your best. And when you found that, it could be the competition. It could be the thrill of the ball coming off square off a club face. It could be a feel in your golf swing. It could be immersed in the target. It could be the ball flight. It could be all kinds of things. That it's in terms of a golfer. And find out what that is. And you know, that's what makes you go.
So I love all this message that you've spoken about you just trusted these guys and you said you're successful, you've been successful, and I'm not going to get in the way of that. How would you describe yourself then as a captain and a leader based on the success that you had in 2014?
How would I describe myself? I think I gave structure, which players like. Generally, golf is a very technical game. It's a very structured game. And generally, the best players are very structured by nature. They're very type A personality. I'm not. It doesn't come easy to me. So I had to make myself type A and surround myself with vice captains who were type A. And I gave them structure. I gave them clarity. I gave them simplicity. And then, as I say, I got out of the way. You know, probably a bit of inspiration as well, too. And a focus in their minds. And created an environment that I would have liked to have played in myself. You know, created what worked for me in my career. So I don't think I was revolutionary, to be honest. I don't think I was a pioneer. I was taking things that had worked in the past and making them better.
So if you were to take that skill set for you as a leader, do you think you could take that and translate it into another industry or another sport?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's huge translations. That's the idea of writing my book was, you know, London Business School pushed me to write this book because so many traits in leadership that I had experienced resonated with the academics in London Business School who said, listen, you got to do a book here. You got to this is what we're hearing from the business world, you know, and let's jump over and bring that in. I think there's huge lessons to be learned. But when I give talks to businesses, Damien, it's really important. This is really important. When I give talks to businesses, a little bit like what Alex Ferguson did to me, it's not for me to tell business leaders what they should do. That's not my world. They're dealing with challenges that I have no idea about, reeling a balance sheet and all of these things. I'm on the board of the European Tour now and the board of the Ryder Cup, and I've learned so much from sitting on those boards with incredibly bright people like Richard Scudamore and Ian Ritchie and, you know, Damon Buffini and, you know, Eric Nicklaus. There's so many people on these boards that I've learned so much from. This is their domain. Reading balance sheets and all of that, that's not what I do. So my idea when I do a leadership talk is to leave lots hanging in the air and for them to pluck what resonates with them.
But what would you say stops most people having that trust in both themselves and the people that they're lucky enough to lead?
Trying to follow a path that maybe trying to follow a path that doesn't resonate with them, that because they've read it in a book or they learned it in college. You know, experiences and your gut instinct, always listen to those, what they have to say. Most of my captaincy, as I say, was done not based on what a manual would say about what you should do as a leader. It was based on me being that soldier, me having those feelings. And if I didn't know the answers, having really good mentoring from a select number of people, and it was a very small number of people, Alex Ferguson being one, to get an insight from them.
Before we move on to our quickfire questions, the final one from me. Is success, based on everything we've discussed, a matter of chance or a matter of choice?
It's got to be choice. It's got to be choice. You've got to put the blocks in place. And as good a job as I feel as I did in a Ryder Cup captaincy, I could never have done it without the talent I had at my disposal. So you've got to have the talent. Whether it's an individual as a golfer, you've got to have some talent. As much as you might have the best drive in the world, and I've come across loads of people in the professional game who have worked so hard, who have just been absolutely obsessed about the game, try to drive themselves, but they never made it because they didn't have the talent. So there's got to be talent. You've got to be working with
the
talent.
drive as well, though.
You've got to combine the two. But you've got to have the talent. You've got to have the talent. You've got to have that ability. And that's what I felt. These players that I was captain, and they were fabulous players. It wasn't for me to contaminate. It was to empower them, not contaminate what they already do. And it was also to keep them all in their own individual bubbles. And, going into the singles matches, and every night I would talk to them individually about why it was important for their careers. Why this was important, what they were doing tomorrow. Not just because they were going to try to create a point for Europe. Why it was important to them. And sometimes it was about, like Martin Keimer, for example, go back to him, 2014 was the year the World Cup soccer Germany had won. And for him it was about ticking the box of being a proud German and being a guy that, your country has won the World Cup soccer this year. And, people are tuning in, wanting to see the German and how did the German player doing, because that's where they're from, and, resonate with them. And I certainly feel that. Go back to my roots as an Irish guy. My background is really, really, really important. And I was certainly representing Ireland as much as I was representing Europe.
So can I ask you one last question, Paul, before we go on to the quickfire? How much of those skills that you adopted as the captain do you think are replicable as a parent?
Yeah, that's a challenge. I got 3 kids myself. I got 1 boy and 2 girls, and they're all great kids. My boy's on a golf scholarship over in America. And so as much as I'd love him to be a professional golfer, I don't want to force him down that road. And I don't want to be the parent that is overbearing and pushing him too hard. It's got to come from within. He's a great kid. He's got loads of talent. And you set out, the work that has to be done. You give examples of players that have done it, and it's up to him then if he wants to do it. And whatever pathway he goes up, whether it be business, whether it be golf, whether it be whatever it is, I'll support him in that way. But ultimately, it's got to come from him, because if I'm what you see from dominant parents is the flame goes out. And if the flame doesn't light, or if they give everything and it doesn't work, they're lost as individuals. One of the saddest things about golf is that people drive themselves so hard to be professional golfers and leave school early and put everything into the one basket. And sometimes parents remortgage the house to finance and all of those things. And then the kids at 23, 24 don't make it. They've run out of money. And now they've got to go and find an alternative way of making money. And the parents don't have it because they've remortgaged the house. And the kids have to start at the bottom of the ladder because they don't have any education, and they don't have a senior education. And they have to take a job teaching or something at the very bottom of the ladder and learn how to be a teacher and all of those things. And it's really, really sad. And so it's important. And again, my advice to my kids is that I've given them such a broad platform that whatever way they want to work, they're going to have that platform behind them. And if it's not into golf, that he's able to come back and he had got a big education. He's at college in America. He's going to come out with a degree in international business, and he's going to have that platform anyway. One of the things that I had, I've been at college for 5 years, and when I went to the tour school, going back to the point we made earlier about not being under pressure. This is a really interesting thing, because Tom Lehman, who captained the American team in 2006, me and him have kind of a little bit at odds at this. He said, because he helps recruit for Minnesota College, and he says, I want to recruit kids who've got no plan B. I want kids who are just so driven to be professional golfers. They're the kids I want. And my argument is, well, that's not my experience, Tom. I want to make sure the kids have a plan B, because that will unburden them to pursue plan A. And in my experience, when I graduated from college with a diploma in marketing and a degree in international business, and a little bit of French as well too, because I lived in Brussels for 6 months when I worked there. So when I went to the tour school, I was like, unlike 99% of the guys who had they were really good superstars in golf from the age of 15 or 16. I wasn't. I had gone down the academic route. So when I went to the tour school with them, I was almost of the feeling, well, it doesn't matter, sure, if this doesn't work out, I've got my degree to go back into, business to go back into. And because I had that mindset, it unburdened me to play well. It goes back to the point about, performing.
Yeah, perspective.
Right, quick fire questions. 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you and the people around you must buy into.
I think honesty is right up there for me. Whatever it may be in any facet of life, if you're dealing with somebody, you need to have complete honesty, and no matter what the problem is, it can be dealt with. One of the advice I gave my kids, the boy in particular, when he went to America, I'm your first phone call. Doesn't matter what it is, I'm your first phone call. We can deal with it. So that will be up there. Non-negotiables. Non-negotiable is a tough term. I don't know if I would go much further than that, to be honest. I think other things can fall in behind that. Once everything is put on the table, we can deal with everything else.
I like that. You're about the 50th person we've interviewed for these podcasts, and you're the first one to give us one non-negotiable and no others. It's good.
Well, I think the rest would feed off that.
Yeah.
Once that's on the table, we can deal with whatever the problem is from there. And as a leader, certainly me as a Ryder Cup captain, one of the jobs of the vice captains was to mingle with the other players, get the gossip. You got to be on the gossip. The Americans call it the water cooler chat. In Ireland, we're great at it. We call it the pub chat. It's important to get the gossip. What's going on? What's the feedback from the players? Who's rowing with the wife? Who's in financial trouble? All of those things. And it's not for me to judge that, but I need to be aware of that if you want to manage it. And I think as a manager, that's why getting to know a person intimately as an individual is so important. If you want to manage them as part of the team.
Love that. What advice would you give a teenage Paul just starting out?
Keep your doors open, that we just mentioned. Education, I think, is hugely important. It's always going to stand to you. There's no reason why you can't pursue an academic career through college and a golf career. I mean, Padraig Harrington is a trained accountant. He's won 3 major championships. It's not because he's brighter than anybody else. It's because he was disciplined. He was driven that way. And also the fact that he had a plan B. I believe a plan B is really important. I think once you're unburdened, and it will always stick to you, will always stand to you. So remain educated for me is really important. And be passionate and be happy about what you're doing. Don't do it because somebody wants you to do it. Do it because you want to do it. Whatever that may be. It doesn't matter what it may be. Billy Elliot is that movie. That's a great movie. Kid who went against all. There's a young Irish guy who's just been part of the Royal Ballet, first Irish guy in 36 years to come over and graduate from the Royal Ballet. And, he grew up playing Gaelic football and all of those hard pursuits. And yet he became a ballet dancer. It's against all the rules of what, a boy should be in theory, if you want to say that. And I think it's great. And Billy Elliot, I love that movie for that, because he pursued his passion.
Listen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jake. Yeah, thank you. Enjoyed it. And keep up the good work, Damien. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give us a thumbs up, leave a review, but somehow get involved with the High Performance Podcast and become part of our growing community. Thanks for being part of the adventure.